I think that, for lack of a better way of putting it, you got to let JD cook. You got to have confidence in him, and he has it. We've seen it. You mentioned the 4 touchdown scoring drives. We've just got to be able to get to that point.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome to the Booth Review. I am your host, Brandon McAnderson. Thank you for joining us. Hey, podcast listener, would you like to earn an extra $500? Go to BlueWirePods.com/survey and complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits. This survey will help you create a better advertising experience for audiences and in turn help this show. That's BlueWirePods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read the full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win. BlueWirePods.com/survey. The link is also in the show notes of this episode. Well, we are back with the 1-2 Jayhawks as they were in Children's Mercy Park facing off against UNLV last week, and they lost 23-20 in a hard-fought game that essentially came down to what felt like a 5-minute goal line stand because of penalties and just pushing them to the maximum down, getting stops, but then missing sacks and getting it back into manageable situations. UNLV and Sluka himself was just at a level of determination and toughness that put them in a position to win the game. This Kansas defense did just about everything that they could do, specifically Jeremy Robinson, who had an awesome game, had 2.5 tackles for loss, had a sack and a half, who was just everywhere. He forced that fumble, and that Kansas defense was just not able to recover. So how does this Kansas team recover and rebound from another tough loss against UNLV team that they just weren't able to find offensive continuity in the second half? More mental errors than we're used to seeing with this team. But let's just start on the offensive side of the ball. How can they recover and rebound? I'm going to go with efficiency. I think that's been the name of the game for Leipold offenses led by Kotelnicki and Coach Zabrowski. They were really good at scheming away high-functioning, successful football, meaning, it's over 4 yards, it's low risk, and has a high rate of getting completed. So I looked, where is the efficiency in the KU offense right now? So here are the top 3 things that I think this offense can lean on throughout Big 12 play and still be in the running to make a run in this conference. I do believe in this defense. I do believe in the talent of this offense, and I completely believe in Coach Leipold and his staff. Number 1, option football. Jalon Daniels is a specialist at reading which pitch guy, lapping him, getting on his outside shoulder, stretching the play, giving running backs an opportunity to run away from that back once they do get the football. You also see he has the ability to hit the seam. He had that 33-yard touchdown. So I went back and charted option plays over the last 2 weeks. What I considered option was if Jalon had the ball and either was faking or taking it himself and has a pitch back. So what I notated was 8 plays. On those 8 plays, Kansas averaged 114 yards and had 2 touchdowns. That is 14 yards per carry. So not only is it effective for JD, but it's effective for the backs. Sevion Morrison has an explosive out of this. Jalon Daniels has an explosive run out of this. And Devin Neal has an explosive run out of this. So all of them have seen success, and it has been a money play for this offense. Blocked well, and like I said, you've got a specialist who can really, really read it. Number 2, more of the alphabet with some of these nicknames. It's JD and LJ. I think they have found an efficiency that's reliable. I think they are able to get open, get the football on his body. I think every attempt to him has been pretty good. So I went back and charted all 3 games with Lawrence Arnold. Lawrence Arnold, when JD is targeting Lawrence Arnold, he's 11 of 16, 131 yards. 2 of those incompletions were drops by LJ in the UNLV game. He's going to have those and find a way to get him. Another 2 of those 5 that were missed were deflected at the line of scrimmage. So this is a combination that has really worked well. And other than the drops, you're looking at 2-3 incompletions when they connect. So I think they are finding a groove. And Grimm and JD have a great groove, and they've had since both players have arrived. So it's nice to see him get in that groove with LJ, keep that thing going with Grimm, and also try to build with some of the other wide receivers as this season progresses. But if you're looking for efficiency, LJ's your guy. If you're looking for money downs, you're looking for man coverage, LJ's your guy. Lots of size. He's the leading returning receiver. You saw some of his run after the catch. He's a great blocker. I think my favorite play of the game was when he had to play tight end in a hurry-up situation and just manhandle the defensive end. So he's just a big physical guy that I think can help be that type of relief valve for JD as he continues to find his way into this season, to find his rhythm and his groove again. I think another part of that is Trevor Cardell. Trevor Cardell is a big target. He's a really tall man, and when he's on the field, you have to deal with him. They got a little bit of rhythm going, got a couple completions. I think he is going to be vital to the middle of the field, pulling coverage towards him and finding soft spots in the zone when he's not had coverage towards him. So I think he's just going to be a big target. And when you're a quarterback that's looking for it, that's struggling to find your way, you want big physical targets. I'm looking at JD, and she's been looking at LJ and Cardell, and I think they can both aid in some of that efficiency and helping him kind of navigate some of these troubled waters he's experienced in the last 2 weeks. Number 3, the thing that I love is all running back touches. Every time a running back touches the football for this Kansas Jayhawk offense, something good happens. I went back and charted the last 2 games between Neal, Highshaw, and Sevion. Every touch has gone for 7 yards, whether that be a rush or a receiving opportunity. Every single one. So that tells you that they're able to do the things that they want to do when they have the football. They make people miss, and it's just a productive place to go with the football. We know about this offensive line and what they've been able to do. And I think there's something to be said about the passing game. Sevion caught a football on a scramble last week. You saw the same thing with Highshaw. Highshaw caught a ball on a scramble. So you're looking for people that are paying attention, they're doing the right things and making football plays. And I think these running backs can continue to do that in this passing game as well as this running game, because you see in the option game they're able to really take advantage. And now in the passing game in some subtle ways, I would like to see a real focus on that to see if we can get some of these guys with the ball in space in the passing game, just because Devin Neal has been a nightmare to tackle one-on-one. So there's also one of the big notes from the coordinator press conference was Coach Grimes' comments about rock bottom, saying that UNLV did represent that rock bottom, and it's tough to get out of that, but now you know for sure, and now the conversations are honest and the work is clean and everybody is able to get on the same page. That is something I can relate to entirely. Anytime I'm talking about football at the University of Kansas, I'm always drawing on my own experience. This season so far has reminded me of 2006 of my career, my junior year. That was the year where Kerry Meyer came in and started at quarterback as a redshirt freshman. John Cornish had a monster year. But a lot of the Orange Bowl guys, the guys that became integral parts of the Orange Bowl guys, were more juniors and sophomores heading into that season. So we were a little younger than this team, but playing with expectations is different. It is just different. And because of that, you see these teams, the way that they celebrate these victories. You got Illinois rushing the field, UNLV. That is something for them that's going to go in their program, that they were able to beat Kansas in Kansas City. So it's one of those things where you see that Kansas has become the big game for some of these opposing teams. And what we're looking for is to see how they handle it, how they respond to it, and I think they will respond well. The reason this reminds me so much of 06 is our ability to run the football that season. If you remember, John Cornish led the Big 12 in rushing. I think he rushed for over 1,500 yards, and it was a school record. I mean, he was dominant game in and game out. Kerry had a very similar season to what JD's having in terms of production. Able to run the football in the zone read game and the option game, just a big physical specimen that Kerry was and still is, actually. Shout out to Kerry. Just a guy that was able to move the football around, super talented, but was struggling to see it, was struggling to distribute the ball, and the offense was really getting bogged down from a passing game standpoint. And late in games, we were not able to close. If you remember, we lost to Toledo in overtime. We had a 7-point lead on Texas A&M at home, and Brian, one of the receivers, fumbled on a screen pass, and that ended up setting up them going into score. Baylor, I believe we were up 35-14 and lost 36-35. So I know how hard some of these moments can be, especially when you're playing and expecting to take a leap as a team. And when you win 9 games and you get associated with Big 12 championships, the leap is that we can compete at the highest level for championships. I still think that this team believes that they can do that, and they have a lot of reason to believe that. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of veteran people. But the reason I bring up 06 is because a lot of those losses taught us how to play with expectations, taught us how to win in difficult situations so that when we did go into the next year, we were ready to close. Now, Brandon, what are you thinking? They got 30 seniors. These guys won't be back next year. I think that's the benefit of the age on the roster. I think when you have as many veteran players as they have, they're going to understand the urgency to get this thing on track very quickly. They're going to understand, hey, we don't have too much more time about this. And that's what he meant by rock bottom. It isn't a rock bottom for the program. It's a rock bottom for where the team is right now. And they can definitely climb themselves out of it. You look at, heading into West Virginia, heading into Morgantown, they're 2.5-point underdogs. Vegas gives you 3 points for being at home. So they think that we are just as good of a team as they are. And I believe that to be true as well. But it's going to take execution in the biggest moments. When you watch this Kansas offense, and each game they've had 2 75-plus yard touchdown drives. They have a recipe that works. So what is it that can keep them on and keep them on track to continue to push and play football at the level that we know that they're capable of? Even in the midst of these struggles, they are having moments that make you say, man, if they could do that consistently, that would work. And that's in the running game, that's in the passing game with LJ, and that's in the option game with JD. I think all these things can start to have an impact on how this football team finishes out the season. And, the brain trust is still the brain trust. You still got Zabrowski, you still got Coach Leipold, and they still have all that synergy and connective tissue. I love what they had to say this week about meeting with JD and meeting with Coach Grimes and finding a way to get him back on track. Just because, the expectation of a player of his caliber is high, especially looking at, all of his statistics coming in and just watching him, the eye test. I still think he's a guy that has that it factor. And, having that extra day off this week of playing a Friday game, I think will give him some more time to just kind of step away from what the experience is now. Because like I said, in 2006, we had a lot of these losses and we had to look ourselves in the mirror and grow as individual players and as a football team. For us, that take didn't happen until 2007, because when we went on the road to play Colorado in 2007, we won that game 19-14. We couldn't get our passing game off the ground. Todd Reesing had less than 200 yards passing, but we were able to get it done on the ground. Same thing for Texas A&M, another game that we won, a one-score game. Same thing. We had opportunities to close the game. I remember specifically against Colorado, we faced a 3rd and 5 with under 5 minutes left, incomplete. We had to punt. Our defense went out and got a stop. We closed the game out. So, some of these things, some of these losses are great teachers. And when you're losing games that you should win based on self-inflicted wounds, whether it be untimely penalties, miscommunications on the back end on defense, missing a sack you feel like you should have had, not being able to return or recover that fumble, it really does put you in a position where you have to look in the mirror. And I think as a coaching staff, they were prepared for this. If you listen to Leipold, he says it weekly. Let's not go counting games that are on the schedule. This is a week-to-week thing. That guy's a champion, and he's won multiple championships, so he knows what it's like to prepare and what it takes when you're coming in and you're playing one of these teams that's really looking at your game as their Super Bowl and their opportunity to position themselves for the rest of the season. So Kansas has gotten a little taste of what it's like to be the favorite and to play with expectations, and the results have not been great thus far at times. But their peak is just about as good of a team as we thought they could be. The talent is all there. The experience is all there. The O-line is awesome. I'm loving what I'm seeing from them. I'm loving what I'm seeing from the backs. And I believe that they can start to make their mark on this season this Saturday in Morgantown. And we'll get into more of that. But if you guys are looking for premium collegiate apparel, look no further than Home Field. They've got the vintage college designs. They're incredibly comfortable. They represent over 150 colleges to choose from. You will find your favorite team and the thing that you want to wear. And like I always mention, the nostalgia piece, that's what college football is to me. That's what people talk about when they talk about pageantry and rivalry. They're talking about that meat, that passion. Home Field embodies that passion with all of their clothing. I know me with the Orange Bowl shirt, it's a shameless plug. I love being on that team. I love my Orange Bowl shirt from Home Field. I love the retro 3-stripe look as well. I mean, you have got to go to Home Field. You will find something that you like, whether you're a Jayhawk fan or otherwise. Please visit Home Field's website, homefieldapparel.com. Homefieldapparel.com. Once again, wide selection to choose from. Use code PAYHEED24.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Booth Review. I am now joined by my radio colleague. He does all the post-game for Kansas football. Just an awesome dude and a really good guy in terms of understanding KU football and is as knowledgeable as anyone else I know. Sean Kellerman, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? Appreciate you having me on. Just trudging through this week that seems like it's taken forever after the Friday night game and pumped for Morgantown. I'm glad we got a early Saturday kick, man. We're going to get that win and then enjoy the rest of the day of college football.
Absolutely. That's always the best recipe for it. Last Friday was not the best recipe as Kansas fell 23-20 to UNLV. So let's just touch on that game just a little bit. For me, I'm going to start with the defense. I thought the defense was incredible. You know, just to hold Ricky Wyatt to basically having no impact on the game, to hold De Jesus to basically having no impact on the game. I think his most impactful play was a 7-yard carry to open the game. Just talk about what you saw in this front seven and their ability to close gaps and tackle and keep a very dangerous offense off the scoreboard most of the night.
Well, what's crazy is a lot of the chatter in the offseason was, replacing guys from last year. I mean, you had Austin Booker came in. He had, I think I've seen 8 sacks. I think he had 9. You knew that Booker was moving on to the professional ranks and you had to figure out somebody. And it was kind of funny because a lot of the chatter was based around guys who hadn't played much when really it should have been based around Jeremy Robinson. And he, to me, has been the most impactful guy. I mean, you couple him with Cornell Wheeler, which the coaches talked about him so much during spring ball, fall ball, everything, as a kind of being a natural guy to head the linebackers. J.B. Brown was the leading tackler against UNLV as well. So the defense has not been the problem. I think there's so many things you can look at. The first thing that jumps out to me, the games against Illinois and UNLV, the defense had 9 TFLs in both of those games. I mean, that's incredible. Jeremy had 3.5 in addition to the forced fumble against UNLV. Cornell and JB have been everywhere. And it's disappointing because you feel like the defense deserves to be 3-0 at this point. Right. And you just haven't gotten enough from the offense. I thought David brought up a great point during the broadcast that this is the 2024 Kansas Jayhawks. This isn't 2023. We can win these types of games. And just kind of how it's played out, you haven't caught a break. You've had too many turnovers. A couple things in regards to fumbles just haven't gone your way. I think guys are pressing a little bit. But overall, the defense, 16.3 points per game they've allowed. And you look at yards per carry for these last 2. I mean, I know there's all this chatter about how Sluka did what he needed to do and won the game for UNLV. You had a great comment on the broadcast too, BMac. You said they've had like 99 carries for 180 yards or whatever it was. It wasn't quite on the money, but it felt like it because KU's defense was there knowing that was their best weapon. 3.9 yards per carry for UNLV. Illinois had 2.3, and their maybe best offensive player, at least heading into that game, we thought was Fagan, the running back. So the defense has answered the call in terms of the front seven. It's hard to really know where the secondary is because you had a couple Illinois players make great individual plays on the outside, and then the secondary otherwise really hasn't been challenged. So it's hard to know on that front, but the defense has done everything in their power to lead Kansas to victory. It's just unfortunate it hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah, and to your point about that defense, the saying that the defensive backs haven't really been tested in a real way, and it's really because there's nowhere to go with the football. I mean, if you look at, last year it was very common to watch a Kansas football game and not see a ball thrown at Kobe Bryant. Well, now, I mean, Mello Dotson might as well have a lawn chair. I mean, I can't remember any targeted attempts to throw the football in his direction. So they've got two guys that really put fear in the offense and really put fear in what they're trying to do. I think Kobe has been a little handsy to start, a little bit impatient with his hands, but he's been in good position every single time. And I think they are more prone to attacking him than they are to Melo, which is an interesting development. And it kind of speaks to, why this defense has been so strong. And I wanted to talk about the defense first, because if you looked at the beginning of the season for Kansas football, a lot of the projections were based off quarterback play. It was based off returning production on offense. It was not based on a defense that continuously gets stops and do it with different personnel groupings. Marvin Grant was dominant against Illinois. His snaps were cut down because of formations on the other side, made no difference. Other guys stepped up and made plays in that linebacker safety hybrid spot, including Alex Rice, who was awesome, the senior, number 34. Just guys that were getting there, making plays, making tackles. And like you said, a lot of the conversation in the offseason has been about who wasn't coming back, but not enough about who was. And if you look at the offseason, you heard a lot about DJ Withers. And yeah, he looks the part. He fits the bill. He's not had as strong of a start, and it mostly has to do with how good the other people are playing around him. Caleb Taylor's been incredible. Tommy Dunn Jr. is a guy that I just can't stop talking about. And the reason is because throughout his early part of his career, he flashed all the time. It was a flash here, a flash here. He could be physical, separate, and get down the line of scrimmage. Now it's happening with regularity, and not just in the run game. He's getting pressures, and this is a big man. So if they can get pressures out of a guy that can plug the run like he can, he makes a linebacker's job very easy. So this defense can be the complementary piece that this offense needs. I truly believe that, because we're seeing it. If an ability to protect the football could have led to some wins, could have led to this team looking back on it and say, we were able to escape that one. That's another 06 thing that, I didn't draw on in the open is when we played Louisiana Monroe in 06. And we just couldn't score, couldn't get stops when we needed it the most, but recovered an onside kick and ended up winning that game 21-19. We very easily could have lost that game in the same way that they've lost these last two games. So I can definitely relate to some of the parallels in seeing it. But being a Kansas football and a historian, how do you expect this team to respond knowing that these are two games they feel like they should have won? The statistics show you, they're almost 2-1 in both games. They show you all these things that are likely true just from what you've seen, whether it be 06, 08, or when things weren't going well, that rebound. What is your expectation for this Kansas football team in response to a couple tough losses?
Well, let me start first with what you said about Tommy Dunn, because he's a guy that Neil Brown said earlier this week he's playing at an all Big 12 level, and he really is. And I didn't talk about the interior defensive line yet, but you have Taylor and Dunn and Withers. The depth overall defensively, particularly of the front seven, is something that we just weren't used to for 10 to 12 years, essentially since you played. We just did not have the depth. We didn't have the size. We didn't have the athleticism. And now you do. And I talked to Tommy a couple days ago, and he said the big thing for him is consistency. And he said that was something that the coaches earlier in his career was kind of a knack on him, is that he didn't have consistent. Like you said, yeah, he flashed, but he wasn't there every single practice, every single game, contributing the way that he can. And it seems like he's really turned the page on that. And in regards to kind of turning the page from losing to winning, one thing that I really want to hone in on, because I know that fans are really upset. We haven't had expectations like this in a long time. The 9 most important games of the season are the 9 that we have not played yet. With the new college football playoff in particular, and the fact that 12 teams get in, and the fact that if you win the Big 12, you are in. I don't want to say the first 3 games didn't matter, but if you want to have any growing pains, that was the time to do it. And again, it's not like the growing pains are going to be done moving forward. You mentioned 06 and how, okay, you guys learned a lot those years. You had close wins, you had close losses throughout your career, and then look how it culminated. This is a little bit different, but to your point that you said in the open, there are 30 seniors on this team. There's no reason that switch can't be flipped a little bit quicker. And I think what I'm seeing and what gives me confidence moving forward, and from a win-loss standpoint, which is what we care about, is I'm seeing so much maturity in just talking to these guys. You heard Devin Neal talking after the Illinois game. He said, okay, maybe this is a wake-up call that we needed. Okay, well, then it didn't go as planned. You thought you were going to come to Kansas City and wax UNLV and everything was going to be fine again. Okay, well, now here you are. Your backs are against the wall again. You hear Luke Grimm talking the other day at the press conference, essentially saying, hey, this doesn't feel like it used to feel. It used to feel his early years at KU like, oh, here we go again. We lost these games. It doesn't feel like that. And you can just tell with how these guys are carrying themselves, they're not shaken by this. They understand that things need to change, and they're going to have a path forward. The other thing, the two losses, they're nothing to scoff at. Illinois and UNLV are going to be decent teams. Who knows if they're going to be 6-6 or 8-4 or whatever. But KU, at least how we see it, is better than those teams. And despite the fact that KU played overall, like a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, when you combine defense and special teams, you were one possession away. You had the JD pick six against Illinois at the end of the half. They're 7 points. And then you had the walk-off ridiculous play touchdown that UNLV got following the interception. There's 7 points there. You lose both those games by fewer than 7 points. The way these guys are carrying themselves against adversity makes me confident, because I just think a few things need to go their way. They've been panicking a little bit. They've had the penalties. They had the fumble that all these guys know what you're supposed to do on a loose ball is fall on the ball. But everybody's trying to make that big play to break the ice. We've had a couple dropped interceptions. OJ had the incredible interception that his foot was an inch out of bounds, and it just didn't go our way. The muffed punt at Illinois somehow ends up in a touchback. I just think that there's a little bit of panic, and I think that these guys are ready to start anew. So that's why I really like our chances against West Virginia, and I know we'll get into this. There's leadership, and I know it's not going to be as slow and steady as your career talking, 06 to 07. It's got to happen now. It can happen. These guys have the leadership skills. They have the maturity. And honestly, we have the coach who has dealt with this, and he's won championships, and he's built programs up. So that's just part of what gives me confidence, is I know that these guys have the right mindset moving forward.
Absolutely. I agree with what you said there, especially with guys like Devin Neal. You see him from moment to moment, just on the verge of something. He always feels like he's on the verge of something. Hopefully he has that breakthrough. And I think, some of the things you highlighted about the strengths of our defense, another reason that, people were high on Kansas is the schedule and the matchups. I think that these offenses match up really well with our defense. I mean, if you look at what West Virginia likes to do, they are very similar to the last two teams that we played. So that's the luxury of playing good football teams. Because like you said, these are good football teams. UNLV is a good football team. Illinois is a good football team. So what you've seen is that we've been better than some teams that are top 25 level teams. And now we have the type of talent and roster fit that can carry over to some really good matchups. And that's what I feel about when I watch West Virginia play football. I look at their offense, and Garrett Green as their starting quarterback. He's like almost a 50% of each of the past two quarterbacks we played. He's got the same kind of suddenness and quickness as Sluka in terms of being able to escape. He's not as big and physical, but he also has the passing aptitude of an Altmaier, meaning he's not going to blow you away and tear you up and shred you down the field, but he will make plays when there's plays to be made. He's got the kind of savvy and playmaking ability you've seen from an Altmaier. He's just not a guy that's going to drop back 20, 30 times and beat you with his arm. He can beat you with his arm as a complement to their run game. And I have never felt better about a Kansas run defense. And this is I know I share a lot of personal stories about my career, but one of my favorite things about 2007 was we knew that if we played a running team, we were going to win. Just because it was going to be so hard for them to consistently get 4 yards a carry and consistently get 4 yards a carry and stay ahead of the chains. It was nearly impossible. And if you watch this Kansas front seven, it's become impossible again. They've got speed on the outside with Reich. You see Barry Hill flying in sometimes. Marvin Grant's flying in there. Sometimes Kobe, when he's in the slot corner, he's flying in there. And these defensive ends, Woodkey is a guy that is, I wouldn't want to say overlooked because he's plenty looked, but he just makes plays. Like he was able to make that play on the jet to De Jesus that pushed them back. He had a sack. He has a certain, talk about a guy that has a knack for the moment. And that's what you reference about the veterans and why I think they can turn it around this season, because that guy is a man. He's a grown man. He's in his 5th year of college football. He knows what's at stake. He knows the risks that he took coming here to take this chance to play football here. And every opportunity he gets, he is showing out and being effective. Keenan Caldwell's a guy that, sometimes is on the depth chart, sometimes isn't, but is definitely in the game making plays. Just a big physical guy who's an older player. So when I look in the eyes of these guys, I see mint. And that's a good sign in terms of being able to turn it around. And it's a good sign when you're facing a team like West Virginia, who is a very run-heavy team where all their passing game comes off of the run. Those are the type of offenses that fit really well schematically with our defense, just because we've got some sticky corners and we can commit a lot of people to the run and let those corners do their job. Just talk about how you feel about this matchup against Green and C.J. Donaldson, some of these offensive weapons the Mountaineers have.
Man, well, first things first, I think both of us 2 weeks ago would be shocked to learn that Sluka and Altmaier didn't have an interception. I mean, I would have thought both those guys threw a couple because, Altmaier, a little bit better of a passer, but you still liked our corners. And to his credit, the main reason Illinois won that game is that he didn't make the mistake. He's not going to be a top 25 quarterback in college football or anything like that, but he didn't make the mistake, and they made big plays, big third down conversions when they needed to. Sluka is a guy who, a key to that game for me was KU forcing him to pass, and I don't think that was rocket science or anything. I mean, that's what this guy does, and he's really good as a runner. He was 7 of 18 through the air. KU did have a couple of chances at interceptions that they didn't convert on, but Sluka also had the size, and the fact that he was able to continue running the ball on that 9.5-minute drive, I think that wore KU's defense down a little bit. I mean, big play after big play. I mean, what happened after that Woodkey -7-yard TFL? 11-yard gain on the ground from Sluka. He was just making so many big plays, and then you had the brotherly shove and all that. So I get all that, and I understand that those guys really didn't make the big mistake, and that was probably the difference. I think the main difference that I see with Green is he's not big. He's listed at 5'11". Sluka's 6'3". Altmaier is 6'2". Same type of deal where they're going to use Green, they're going to use Donaldson, but outside of their 6'7" tight end, Taylor, I think is his name, I don't see a ton of options on the outside. Like Bryce Ford Wheaton isn't walking through that door for West Virginia. He had the size from the outside, and he was a guy who could beat you deep, and he did beat KU deep a couple times back a couple years ago when KU had that pick six to win it. So I think that it's going to be a similar deal where you want to make sure that Green is put in passing situations. And you got to think that KU is going to take advantage because while he's a little bit more comfortable as a thrower on the run, from what I can tell, than what Sluka was, there's going to be a mistake made. There's going to be multiple mistakes made. As long as KU forces those third and medium, third and long, those passing situations, stays at home against any potential option plays, forces the throw. Like you said, we have two of the best corners in the country. And I think that our front seven, I don't have any issue envisioning them forcing those third and medium, third and long. The difference is you got to find a way to finish the drive. What's frustrating is, we're looking at some of the things defensively for KU that we can do. And we just talked about how solid they've been, right? Offensively, which I know we'll get to, that's where KU can win this game. They have the ability to get in a rhythm like they did a couple different drives, each of the first two real games of this season, and find something, because I'm very confident that KU has more weapons defensively than West Virginia has weapons offensively.
Yeah, that's going to be a strong offensive line. I know they lost a player to the NFL, to the Steelers. So they got players up front other than him. So they'll be able to run the football. But, man, I'm really liking this front seven and their ability to match up and play really good football. And, these teams, there's a lot of RPO, play action, heavy run teams. And that is just a really good fit for how we play defense. So I assume that will be another matchup that we can take advantage of. on the outside, let those guys play the game and use that front seven to make it really hard to run the football, double up those gaps. Can't wait to see that defense come out and compete again and hopefully close. They talked about versus Illinois, it was, I think they were at one point, Illinois was 2 of 10 on third down. Then they went, 4 of 4 down the stretch, and that's what won them the game. UNLV was 2 of 12 on third down, and they actually won it on fourth down because they never really figured out how to get third down conversion. So this defense is making progress every week. I expect them to get better, and it's just so many guys, Sean. I mean, it's so many guys. It's not 11 guys. It's at least 22. It might even be 25. So there's just players everywhere. Mason Ellis is a guy that's been awesome on special teams, plays 2 or 3 series on defense as well. He's done well. Tywan Berryhill is playing a slightly different linebacker role. He's been effective. I mean, they basically aren't playing a player that's not playing well. So it's just been fun to see them, exchange people, put people in, and hopefully they play well enough to get this team over the hump and get that complementary football from this offense. And speaking of complementary football, one of the hardest things to do in college football is to drive the ball. A lot of these college football offenses are centered around explosives, whether it be in the run or the pass game. This Kansas offense has been able to put together long, sustained drives, 7, 8, 12-yard drives. They've had two 75-plus yard touchdown drives in each of the last 2 games. So my curiosity, Sean, one of the challenges I asked of you is, I've mentioned some stats about some, good things in the option game, the LJ thing. What have you seen that you feel like they can duplicate on a more consistent basis to play complementary football to a really strong defense?
Well, I think you just said it. I think it has to be complementary football. After the Illinois loss, there was a lot of, and understandably so, calling for KU to run the ball more, and unfortunately we didn't have Hishaw against UNLV. Hopefully we have him against West Virginia, but I think it was clear that Jeff Grimes and the KU offense, they were going to run the ball more often. The problem was when JD lost his confidence seemingly following that interception, KU became so one-dimensional, and that just cannot happen because then all of a sudden you got a defense stacking the box, then you pick up a penalty, it's 1st and 20. And I said this before, I mean, you just got to get your jive, your groove back. Last year, 1st and 20 was nothing for this team. I mean, it's like, all right, well, we got 3 plays. But with how it felt in the second half on Friday, it was like 1st and 20. Man, I don't know how we're going to do this, especially because with the lack of confidence seemingly in JD, it was like, well, we're just going to run the ball. And everybody in the stadium, including the UNLV defense, knew we were going to run the ball. And then all of a sudden, we lost that. So I think that, for lack of a better way of putting it, you got to let JD cook. You got to have confidence in him. And he has it. We've seen it. You mentioned the 4 touchdown scoring drives. We've just got to be able to get to that point. Jeff Grimes said in his press conference yesterday that it seems more likely than not that Coach Z is going to go down to the sideline and Jeff Grimes is going to go up to the booth. I don't know if that's for sure going to happen, but I would think that as a play caller, that would be helpful for Jeff Grimes. And I would think that on the sideline, JD is used to having Z down there. And I just think that a familiar face would be a positive. A familiar face in any facet of life is positive when you're going through some stuff. Not that JD and Jeff Grimes don't have a good relationship. They just have not been together. They don't have that familiarity. So I think that potentially could be a little tweak that doesn't go unnoticed come season's end. But I think that a good way to get JD going, and credit Jeff Grimes for this a little bit, you have to continue to give him chances in the option game, like you talked about in the open. Let him run the football, let him get some confidence, pick up some first downs, and try to, as often as possible when game script allows, give him a chance to throw high percentage dump offs to the boundary or something over the middle. I just think that pass over the middle that Jackson Woodard, the UNLV linebacker, that was just kind of a microcosm of his confidence at that point, because that's one of those plays that if you want your quarterback to get right, that's the type of play that you run for them. And he just didn't see Woodard for whatever reason. And the other thing is you got to get his confidence back because you have so many dudes on the outside. I mean, West Virginia in this one, they've got new corners. KU has guys on the outside who have been here, who have size, who can make big plays, who can make the medium plays and the short plays turn into big plays, all that sort of thing. And we haven't seen that three-headed monster on the outside because our quarterback has been struggling be able to make their presence known for the majority of these 3 games. So I think at the end of the day, you do want to make sure that Devin Neal and hopefully Highshaw are out there. And yeah, you want to feed them the rock, but you got to make sure your quarterback is out there confident in himself. And you have to give him the opportunity to do that, or else one-dimensional offense is not going to work against anybody.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned it because it's something to think about with Coach Z coming down on the sideline. Coach Z is a high energy, has a certain joy factor to him, and gets guys going. You hear him all the time. You hear him demonstratively communicating. I remember last season, that was just always a familiar presence to look on the sideline and see. So that would be good to have back. And like you said, the pressing part of it, I'm used to seeing a certain amount of joy in the way that JD has played this football game. It's what's made him such a fan favorite. I just want to see that spark again, that self-belief. I know he hasn't lost it, but he's going to need some support from the schematics around him and from the staff around him and from the team around him, because you're hearing a lot about him because you heard about him the whole offseason. You heard about him for 2 years, but this isn't a one-man mistake machine. This is a problem that is across multiple areas that they are looking to address. And like I said, I trust that brain trust and their ability to do so. And when I look at West Virginia has some injuries on the interior of their defensive line, which they're dealing with. They're pretty good at the linebacker spot, pretty athletic at the safety spot. Got some twitchy guys that can come off the edge. But like you mentioned, that cornerback position is one where they struggled against Pitt. And I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch the Pitt West Virginia game. I mean, it was like Varsity Blues inside of some other all-time football movie. It was just because they hate each other so much, so there's just so much excitement. It was a fun football game to watch, but it's very similar to 2022. West Virginia lost to Pitt in a game that they probably should have won, 38-31. They end up losing this game 38-34 in a very similar fashion, a game that they probably thought they should have won as well. So they'll have some. That 11 o'clock kickoff, they'll have a chance to. I think this Kansas team will have a chance to jump out early. I think there will be a little bit reserved, holding with that opportunity that they just had. They just let slip away. And you're looking at 2 teams that feel like they let opportunities slip away. So I'm excited to see what kind of ways this offense can answer the bell. And just out of curiosity, it makes me wonder, and I'll ask your opinion on this, knowing that they played Penn State first and are to open the season, knowing that what some of those looks were that KU can duplicate. Do you see that as an advantage in terms of looking at the film and saying a lot of what Penn State's doing comes from, some of the things that they saw Kotelnicki do? Does that help them in terms of putting together a game plan to have an effective passing game? Because what you saw in Penn State, West Virginia was an efficient passing game, what you're used to seeing with Kotelnicki. I wonder if, in your opinion, you think some of that can transfer over to this football game coming Saturday.
Oh my God, that's a great point. I mean, and that's, a situation that you're rarely going to encounter for college football, to where your previous offensive coordinator faces a team the next year and you have an opportunity to go back and see kind of what success he had. And yeah, like you said, it was 34-12. Penn State won. I think absolutely you look back on that and see, okay, what not only was Penn State successful at, but what mirrors what our crop guys have been successful at during their time at KU, because that there's something in there that could maybe break the ice. The other thing that I think could break the ice, BMac, and I know this is asking a lot, but sometimes you got to have that spark that comes from somewhere else. And again, maybe it is something as small as Coach Z bringing his energy down there, but maybe it's a defensive score. That's the one thing the defense hasn't done, is they haven't been able to have takeaways because, they haven't been able to fall on a fumble, interceptions barely outside, bobbled interception. Maybe you need a Jackson Woodard type play where he brings the ball inside the 5, and then you can get some points, and then you can get consistency on that front. Maybe you need a big play from Trevor Wilson in special teams. Lance Leipold always talks about how you win as a team, you lose as a team. And that's why I think Coach Leipold said at his press conference something along the lines of, 9.5 minute drive and defense has got to get off the field. And And I agree. And like you said, same thing happened at Illinois, their last drive. But boy, that's a lot to ask of a defense. I think that there's a little bit of coach saying that, insinuating, hey, we're all a family, we're all doing this together. Just like if KU goes out and wins 56-49, there's going to be something about the offense that could have just been a little bit better to set up the defense for success. So I just think all of that is part of the mind games of a coach and making sure that the team has that cohesiveness. Again, we're not as far away as we think. There are little things, and I know fans, like I said earlier, are going crazy, and they don't want to hear me saying KU's goals are still on the table because, there's no way we go and beat West Virginia. Did you see, who we just lost to at home and all that? None of that matters right now. What matters is moving forward and the fact that KU has not played a Big 12 game yet. And this is another situation where the more I look at it, I like our guys in this matchup. I think we have better players. I think we have a deeper roster than West Virginia. You just got to go out and you got to play easily your best football game to this point, but you got to get back to the confident, fun team that you had, particularly on offense, because we know we've got the talent. We got to utilize our talent and get back to the fundamentals. That's the last thing I say before I'll kick it back to you. Lance Leipold, since he's been here, one thing about his teams, the fundamentals have always been there. You even look at the first year when KU went 2-10, you could noticeably see the difference in things like penalty yards, things like picking up blocking assignments, things like turnovers. Everything has gotten a little bit better. A big thing, people not dropping passes. How often did we see that before Coach Leipold got here in that 10 to 12 years? Like, those little fundamentals have not been an issue until this year. And this is the first adversity that Coach Leipold and the KU program have had since he got here. It's the first time that they're maybe below the expectation line when all the 3 years prior, we were above that expectation line. And I think just getting back to basics, getting back to that fundamentally sound brand of football where you're not turning the ball over, you're not dropping passes, you're falling on a fumble when it's bouncing around. I think that's going to be the key. And then I think KU is going to be right there, and they're going to look up and say, we just won that game by 14 points, and we didn't even play our best ball. So I think all that's on the table for KU. I just think they're little tweaks that hopefully come sooner rather than later, because I know the fans want it, but nobody wants it more than the guys out there.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. Just making a play, something off script, something that's not playing. If you looked at that West Virginia Pitt game, one of the big turning points was Pitt blocking a punt and returning it for a touchdown. So you just need that one thing that can shift the momentum. You can see it every week in college football. This team is doing everything but that. Right. So you got to figure that some of the turns will happen there. And then the comments about expectations, what it's done to the fan base, and some of the difficulties that we've seen as a result of it. What I would say to this team and these guys right now is that, going from my experience on that Orange Bowl team, we were entirely insulated. We were insulated from praise, and we were insulated from criticism. So no matter what happened, no matter who showed up to the games, no matter what it sounded like or what it looked like, it was about us and our team, and we were all that we have. And I think in this moment, they can feel that. They can feel how easy this thing can turn on you when people do have expectations. I'm not talking about everyone. Obviously, a lot of our fans are still behind this team 100%, still support them and still go about doing it the right way. But there's an element of the bad guy that I really enjoyed for this team, something that they've not had a chance to play. They've not been the bad guy. They've been the oh shucks, look how cute they are team. And now it's time for them to take that next step. They are the hunted team, and now they are the doubted team. But they are also still a very talented and a still very dangerous team. And no matter what happens, you hear all the time in a fight, you hear a puncher's chance. And a puncher's chance is about ability. It's about the ability to end it in a moment's notice. And when you look at the talent on this Kansas football team, they have knockout power. This is a team that can get knockouts on a regular basis. The defense has exceeded any reasonable expectation, and the offense will get back on track with JD and some of the coordination, and they will do that in West Virginia, in Mountaineer country. I cannot wait to see what the Jayhawks have in store, and an opportunity to really put a statement on the early quarter of this season with a win out in Morgantown. Sean Kellerman, thank you so much for joining me. This is the Booth Review. We'll see you next week as we get ready to head to Arrowhead. We'll have some cool giveaways as part of this podcast. So stay tuned. Thanks again, Sean.
All right. Thanks, BMac. Rock Chalk.